viewers. So this is just a quick addendum to Matt Easton's video announcing the publication of Pringle-Green's boarding actions manual. I actually did a really good seminar on Pringle-Green at the International Sabre Symposium in Hamburg a few years ago, so it's great to have the source material finally available to the public. That's really exciting. But I do have a little bit of extra information to add, particularly in relation to the one technique that Matt discussed, that is using your pistol to cover your forearm as an additional parrying weapon. Okay, so where the hell did Pringle-Green think of such an outrageous idea? I think I might have an idea. I'm sure we're all aware that 18th century Highlanders went into battle armed with a broadsword, a targe and a dirk. And the dirk was held in the left hand behind the targe as an additional weapon, with accounts saying that as they approached bayonet lines they would take the bayonet aside with the targe, kill one bloke with the sword and another one with the dirk. And this also gives me a chance to show off what I did with that plastic riot shield. So it's now all covered and pretty. But not all Highlanders actually went into battle with targes. They were relatively rare and really restricted to the clan gentry, who formed like the front line of the clan army. But even without a targe, we also know that Highlanders still used the dirk in their offhand as an additional weapon. We have both pictures of them doing this and accounts of them. For example, Archibald, the son of the Laird of Glenorchy, who's getting into a dispute with a group of rivals and stabs one of them in the heart with his dirk, whereupon the slain man's posse turn their swords against the unlucky fellow, but he, with his dirk in one hand and his sword in the other, defended himself with such incredible valour, it is likely he would have escaped in favour of the approaching knight if he had not, as he retreated backwards, stumbled upon a plough that took him and brought him to the ground, where he was cut to pieces. So that's just one example. There are plenty of others. There's even one account where some Campbell clansmen, having been disarmed of everything except their dirk, used the saw edge on the back to cut down some saplings to make improvised cudgels, and then fought with dirk and cudgel against their pursuers, quite successfully apparently. The combination of sword and dirk was also very common in Ireland. In fact, probably more common than in Scotland. We see quite a few examples, both illustrations and written accounts of Irish warriors with a sword and what they called a skean, which is the Irish name for the long knife. That was a really common combination. Irish warriors also liked to wear a big metal gauntlet on their left hand rather than a targe, and that would have helped in battle, of course. And there's also the famous Barrington account of the two Irish gentlemen who fought a duel with broadsword and skean, and the victor used it to cut the head off the loser and present it to the officials presiding. So broadsword and dirk or skean was definitely a combination. Now, how do we know how they used it? Well, we have actually a really good account. So this account comes from the memoirs of a Highland officer who fought in India, recalling his friend Captain G.W. MacDonald, who was the son of Lieutenant General Alistair MacDonald and was unfortunately killed at Lucknow. But nonetheless, he recounts that Captain MacDonald always went into action with his dirk drawn in his left hand, which most of us discarded it as merely an ornamental weapon. But one day he illustrated to me how the Highlanders used to use it, not only as a weapon of offence, with its point turned outwards, but also as a shield and buckler to protect the head and the whole body against sword cuts, with the broad back of the blade pressed against the forearm, the point towards the elbow, the edge turned outwards, and of course using the left hand. So here we have a clear account from the middle of the 19th century of the Highland traditional method of using the dirk in the left hand. And it is held like this. And this is, of course, almost exactly what we are told to do with our pistol. Having discharged it, we can then turn it over and hold it in exactly the same manner and do exactly the same sort of things. So it seems to me quite likely that this method of using the pistol originated from either the Highland or Irish tradition of using the dirk or skean in exactly the same manner. And I just so happen to have a dirk with an antler handle, which is, you know, a traditional thing as well, which is ever so slightly kinked, and that happens to sit on the arm in a very, very pistol-like fashion. So exactly how was the dirk used? Now, without any handguard, it's not exactly ideal as a parrying weapon, okay? So if I've got my alehouse dagger here, I'm quite confident to just stick it out there and parry blows with it, because I've got a super hilt. So, you know, sword and dagger in the English fashion with a nice alehouse dagger, brilliant. But if I've only got a dirk, I'm certainly not going to stick it out there because my hand will get cut off. And in fact, Swetnam says explicitly, if you do not have a hilt on your dagger, the first thing you should do is pluck it back so that your hand doesn't get hit. And the same applies if I'm holding it upside down. I'm not going to extend it out there because it's just too big a target. And in fact, both Silver and Swetnam agree that even with a big alehouse dagger, you shouldn't be relying on the dagger as your primary parrying device. Okay, Steve Hand did a video on this, a couple of videos, a little while ago on why you should not attempt to parry with the dagger single, and that applies even more so to the dirk. So, how was it used? Well, if we follow Swetnam and Silver's advice, which seems to carry through the years, they recommend parrying double. In other words, when I defend myself, my sword is doing primarily the defending. The dagger, whether it's held this way or this way, will be there as a supporting weapon in order to help bind the other person's sword aside in order to open up a line for a riposte. And this seems to be most likely how it was used. So if Harry throws a blow at me, I could, of course, parry like that, but that's pretty risky. Okay, it's not a big surface area, it's being jammed into my own arm, and there's a very high chance of me misjudging it and parrying with my hand. So what Silver and Swetnam would actually recommend is to parry primarily with the sword and have the dagger there in order to hand the parry off to. So I could, for instance, do that, or that, or on the outside, take the sword, or if I can get to the wrist, even better, because I get to spin him around. So the dagger, the dirk, is not the primary parrying device. It is there as a second parrying device. It's there as a backup in case my parry is insufficient, and it is there to hand off the sword to bind it and to control it so that I can then get a riposte in free. So that is my little bit of extra thoughts on Pringle-Green. And maybe with a bit more biographical information about him, we might know where he actually learnt that trick. But the only other thing I was going to say is, if you're actually going to go out and do this in sparring, then for the love of all that is holy, wear a decent gauntlet on your left hand, okay? Because it will get hit. The hiltless dirk is not the most reliable parrying weapon in the world, and even when you're trying to use your sword primarily, it will occasionally get whacked, so take precautions. That's it. I hope you enjoyed.